Well, I'm delighted to be here, and this actually is very important to get the word out that hoarding or hoarding disorder is actually a psychiatric condition. It's a mental health problem in the same way that depression is, that schizophrenia is, that bipolar illness is, and it's a serious one affecting millions and millions of people.
For some people, it's just a TV show that they watch, and they get a good laugh out of it. But it's really serious, and it really is consuming. And the people who are involved with this, man, they don't know what to do. They're at their wits' end, aren't they?
They are. And there are a lot of people who are suffering, not just the person with hoarding disorder, but also their family members and the people who love them. And often they feel powerless to actually change things and help the person, in part because many of these individuals are often not open to help, not open to treatment, not open to actually even being helped by family members. And so it's very frustrating, and perhaps that's the most frustrating thing for family members, is the steadfast refusal of their loved one to accept their help or anyone's help.
What is it about that we just can't part with a lot of the things that we should part with?
Well, we all have attachments to things. There are three kinds of attachments. There's sentimental attachment. Those are the things that we hold on to, like your high school yearbook, the corsage to your first prom, the baby booties. We hold on to those things because they trigger very pleasant memories, and we hold on to those things. We have intrinsic attachments to things. These are attachments to things that some quality of it that is attractive to us. So, if you have a lot of money, you have very expensive paintings on the walls because you have an intrinsic attachment to some quality. But, you can have, a piece of polished glass, that you got on one of your vacations that you hold on to. It's of no value to you except something about the quality. Someone else might not be all that keen about it. And then we have instrumental attachments to things, which is that we hold on to things because we may use them someday. So we may have an old pair of running shoes that we could get another couple of miles more in, or we have some rusty hinges that you just have to kind of like polish them up and they're perfectly usable. So the bottom line is we all have attachments to things, and that's not necessarily the problem. The problem with people with this condition is that their attachments are so intense that when it comes to let go of things, they simply have trouble doing it because they experience a profound sense of loss and distress and anxiety. And so it's not like they're very different from us in terms of attachments, but it's the level of attachment that they have to objects, many, many objects that we in our own might think are not of particular value.
Why can't we see that disorder in ourselves?
Well, because it's not a disorder in us. What constitutes a disorder, what gives it the D, is that the problem, the behaviors, the situation is disruptive. For most of us, our things don't disrupt our lives. We can sleep in our beds, we can use our toilets, we can cook meals in the kitchen. People with this condition, they can't use those living spaces the way they were designed to be used because there's so much stuff. And also, we don't experience necessarily distress in our environment, even if it's a little cluttered. And if we had to, we could let go. We could clear up and clean it and move things out. People with this condition, they can't do that. And so stuff builds and builds and builds, and then their life kind of like gets out of control.
Any signs that people can look for before it gets out of hand?
Well, actually, hoarding behavior itself actually starts at, the mean age of onset of the behavior itself is like 12 years old, right? So this starts very young. The tendency starts very young. But but kids don't really meet criteria for hoarding disorder because they don't have control of their environment, and so they have parents that are moving things out and clearing things. It's when these kids grow up and move out and they have control of their own environment, that's when it can become a problem. But some of the little subtle things that you can see that suggest that someone may have a problem is that if you go into someone's home and they don't permit you to go into certain rooms, that could suggest that they have rooms packed with stuff. If they don't like to loan things to you, like you see a magazine and say, oh, I'd love to read this article. And say, no, you can't do that. It has to stay here. So seeing some attachments to things that they can't part with. Many times homes that sit in neighborhoods, drapes drawn and the curtains pushed back against the windows suggests that perhaps there's a lot of stuff in that house. And people who aren't willing to actually let you in your home, like you set up a little date and they say, oh, I'll meet you at the restaurant. Or, and they say, well, let me give you a ride home. No, 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 I can go home, no problem. People who don't want you in their home and will give you reasons why they want to pick it. So there are these subtle things. And there are lots of ways that people keep this behind closed doors. This is a problem that is behind closed doors, but I can tell you, as years go by, people with this problem are going to be discovered more and more and more, and we're going to be really challenged as communities are going to be really challenged about how to deal with this problem because our population is aging, and it's going to be serious.
Some of these people don't live alone. They actually have, husbands, wives, and children.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be difficult for those family members to try and live in this environment too, because this is a person they love,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want to hurt them. But in reality, everyone's being hurt.
That's true. There are people who live that have children, young adults, partners, spouses who live in these environments, and they are suffering too. And you might say, well, why don't they just tell them to throw stuff out? Well, like if you're married and you have a partner and there's something you don't like about something, it's not always easy to get your partner to do what you want them to do, and you can get a lot of pushback. And there are kids who are raised in these environments who are deeply ashamed, and their actual development is influenced because some of these kids have never had a sleepover. Anyone come? They may not have had birthdays or family celebrations in this home. They actually, when they reach teenage years and where self-care and self-hygiene is so important, taking regular baths is hard. Finding a place to put your cosmetics, it's hard. All these things affect people who live in these environments, and then there's a lot of distress and conflict in relationships in homes that are hoarded out.
For somebody who can see this later and say, you know what, that's just my uncle being my uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Why should they care?
Well, there are a lot of people whose homes are highly, highly cluttered who probably don't have this condition. That there's a big range of comfort in terms of clutter. And some people like their homes nice and neat and tidy, and other people less so, right? And just because somebody kind of has stuff laying out in their front yard and their grass is not well maintained doesn't mean they have this problem. Right? And so there are a lot of pieces to this problem, but some of the things that make this a problem are not just the level of clutter, but the person's maybe compulsively acquiring so many things, and then once they have them, they can't let go of them. And those pieces also contribute to the problem. It's not just the clutter. And so you really want to be able to sort out whether this is a psychological condition or just a lifestyle choice. And it can be a lifestyle choice. It really can. People have the right to live the way they want.
And I imagine it must be bad to just go in there to somebody's house and say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of this stuff for you.
That's right. Well, yeah, it is. And also, I can appreciate that. If somebody came in my home and said, I don't like that, throw it out, I probably would say no. Right? So this is a condition in which it typically is rather low insight, meaning that people don't necessarily see that there's a problem, or they minimize the consequences of the problem. And so most often you are going to get a lot of pushback. And particularly for people who have been doing this, for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, you can't imagine that they're going to let you do this just like that.
And I imagine for that long, it's a long process to get them, to weed them off.
That's right. And even if they were willing, probably by that time the state of their home is not something that can be done by one person or even a couple of people. It probably takes a lot of people to clear out a home and get it organized. I mean, I've met with many, many family members who had a loved one with this problem, and then finally the loved one died, and they, 4, 5, 6 people over many, many weeks spent many, many weeks clearing out this home. This is not a problem that one person can do, in a couple of hours.
Is it getting worse? Are we getting on top of this problem?
I think that what is happening is that we have an aging population, and we're discovering more. Because this is a problem that's behind closed doors. And so a lot of people, and particularly the people who are at the greatest risk, are these older adults in their 60s, 70s, 80s, sometimes 90s, who have been living these conditions and are at really, really great risk. Okay? So I don't think that the prevalence per se is increasing necessarily, although we don't have any data really to guide us on that. But I do think that we're discovering more people. But because if what we do know is that the behavior starts at 12 years old. That's the average, age of onset of the behavior. And so you're talking about something that's been going on for many, many, many years, all this stuff building up. So I don't think that the prevalence is probably any different, but I think that the education and the discovery is changing for a variety of reasons.
What's the best way for families to begin the process of healing?
Well, there's kind of like this saying that it's really, that you cannot clear the clutter until you've cleared the air, okay? And many of these family members have been trying to help their loved one for many, many years, and that's created a lot of conflict, a lot of mistrust, a lot of resentment, a lot of hurt feelings. And so all of that is part of their relationship. And so to expect that your loved one who is still hurt or resentful or angry about things that have transpired over the years to kind of welcome you back into their home and let them help you is probably not realistic. And so what I really counsel family members to do is to start rebuilding those relationships, rebuilding the trust, actually, going and visiting their loved one and not talking about the stuff. What happens is relationships get so over-focused on the stuff, and every conversation is about the stuff. So they may start talking about something pleasant, but then they swing back to talking about, well, why don't you get rid of some stuff? Why don't you let me help you with some stuff? And then there's an argument, another blow-up. So I really try to actually build a relationship and restore a relationship, and because the relationship is really the only leverage you have. If you don't have a good, positive relationship with your loved one, you're not going to be able to help him or her. And you're starting there. If the person is open to treatment, definitely find a provider that's experienced in treating this problem and get them into treatment. A nice in between is to find a support group for hoarding and cluttering, and many communities have these support groups. Support groups are great in terms of destigmatization, so they destigmatize the person. They may be more open and willing to accept other forms of help, including treatment. So, and the good news about this is through education and hoarding task forces and what's going on here is that not only we're getting the word out, but we're thinking creatively about how to reach these people and how to help these people. And so I am confident that we're going to see more and more of that over the years in this community and others, which is wonderful.
Good. Yep. Very good.
Thank you very much.